Once there was this young man who was driving through some of the back roads of Tucson, and he got a little bit lost. And as he was trying to make his way through those streets, he noticed that standing on the sidewalk, there was this young woman. And by the way she was looking around, by the way she was standing, she seemed lost. And not just this, but it was a cold evening outside, and she was wearing shorts and t-shirt. And so he pulled up next to her, noticing that she was rather attractive. And he rolled down his window and asked if she needed a ride somewhere. And she nodded yes. And so he opened up the passenger seat door, and she got inside and sat down. And she was still shivering as they drove off, and so he handed her his jacket, which she gladly wrapped around her shoulders. And he asked where she needed to go, but she didn't respond with words. Instead, she just nodded in a certain direction. And so he drove in that direction. And then he saw that she was nodding in another direction, and so he turned. And he kept on following her nods until finally she nodded as if this was the place. And he stopped and looked over, and there was a small house. And he heard as she got out of the car and without saying a word, closed it behind her and walked up towards the house. Well, that was strange, thought the young man, and he drove off. And it was a while later when suddenly he remembered, oh, my jacket. Well, it was too late to go back there and get it now, but he figured he could go the next day. And besides which, she was rather attractive, albeit a bit strange, and maybe this was a way to chat with her, maybe she was just in a weird place that night. And so he waited until the next day, and when the time was reasonable enough, he drove back to that house which he had been directed to by this girl, and he got out and walked up to the front door, and the door opened, and standing there was an older woman. And the young man said, "Excuse me, but last night I gave this young lady a ride, and she has my jacket. I was wondering if I could get it back." And all the color drained from the older woman's face. She said, "Describe the young woman to me." So the young man started describing her as she had appeared to him, and with every word, the look on that older woman's face made the young man just grow more and more nervous, more and more unsure of himself, until finally he stopped and said, "Tell me, what's going on?" And the old woman said, "The girl you're describing is my daughter. She died years ago." The young man might as well have staggered backwards, he was so shocked. And not knowing why, he asked, "Then, where is she buried?" And the woman told him the name of the graveyard, and she told him the name of her daughter. So the young man apologized to the older woman, and he got back into his car, and he drove towards this graveyard, which he knew of. And he got out, he walked amongst the gravestones until he finally found the right one. And sure enough, there, at the base of that gravestone, was his jacket.